The night I found out was the night my whole world came crashing down. It wasn't like how I imagined. There were no screaming matches, no big confrontations. There was only silence, heavy silence, and the undeniable feeling of betrayal, suffocating me. I had always thought I was strong, independent. I believed I could handle anything life threw my way. But nothing had prepared me for this type of heartbreak. It wasn't just the lies. It was the fact that someone I loved, someone I trusted with everything I had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even begin to understand. What do you do when the person you've committed to for eternity isn't committed to you at all? I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that I could turn a blind eye, pretend I hadn't noticed the signs. But deep down, I knew the truth. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel the sting of her lipstick on his collar and the lingering scent of perfume that wasn't mine. That night, I confronted him, but it wasn't the confrontation I expected. It wasn't the shouting or the drama I had built up in my head. It was cold, calculated, and he didn't even seem surprised. He had prepared for this moment, just like he had prepared for every other lie he told me. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words were hollow. I knew they meant nothing. And just like that, my life changed. I was no longer just his wife. I was someone caught in the storm of love, betrayal, and the bitter truth that I wasn't enough. I wish I could say that I walked away that night, that I showed him the door, packed my bags, and never looked back. But the truth was more complicated than that. It's easy to judge someone from the outside, to tell them what they should have done. But when it's you, the one in the relationship, the one who gave everything changes. How could I leave when my entire world had been built on a lie? How could I walk away from the man I thought I knew, the man who promised me forever? I stayed. I stayed because I wanted to believe that love could conquer all. I wanted to believe that this was just a bump in the road, that we could work through it, rebuild, and come out stronger on the other side. But as the days went on, as I tried to convince myself that I could forgive him, I realized something. I didn't know who I was anymore. I spent years pouring myself into someone else's needs. I lost myself in his promises, in the life we were supposed to have. And now, I was left with nothing but the shattered pieces of a love that wasn't real. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. I wanted to heal, but I was afraid that healing meant facing the truth. That meant admitting that the man I loved, the one I thought I could trust, had broken me in a way that would leave a scar forever. But then again, maybe the scar was all that was left of what we once had. There was another side to all of this, one I didn't expect. In the midst of the betrayal, I found myself questioning everything. Who was I? What was I worth? What did I deserve? And that's when he showed up. The other man. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't part of the plan. But somehow, he crept into my life, and with him, he brought a distraction I didn't know I needed. He was everything my husband wasn't: alive, vibrant, spontaneous. He reminded me of the woman I used to be. The woman who had dreams, passions, and desires outside of being someone's wife. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. I had never felt so seen, so desired. And in his arms, I forgot the pain of my marriage. I forgot the betrayal. But as time passed, I found myself at a crossroads. Did I continue this forbidden relationship, knowing it could destroy everything? Or did I try to salvage my broken marriage? It was a decision that tormented me. I remember the day everything came to a head. It wasn't a big argument, it wasn't a dramatic moment, it was just a look, a single glance that changed everything. My husband came home late, as usual. He'd been working, or so he said. But I knew better. And he knew that I knew. The guilt was written all over his face when he walked into the house. I saw it in the way he avoided eye contact, in the way his hands trembled when he reached for a glass of water. And I hated myself for what I was about to do. I walked into the living room where he sat, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. He wasn't the one who held me when I cried, who whispered sweet things in my ear, who promised me that nothing could tear us apart. He was a stranger, a man who had betrayed me and didn't even seem to care. "I know," I said, my voice calm but shaking. He didn't need me to elaborate. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The other woman, the lies, the secrets. And yet, he still didn't say anything. He just stared at me, as though waiting for me to make the next move. This was the moment of truth. Would I confront him and risk everything? Would I destroy the last remnants of our relationship? Or would I keep pretending, continue to live in this broken marriage, all while silently aching inside? I did neither. I walked out. I couldn't look at him anymore. Couldn't look at the life I had so desperately tried to hold on to. I didn't go far. I just drove. And drove. Until I ended up at his door, the other man's door. I had no plan. No idea what would happen once I saw him again. All I knew was that I couldn't be alone. I couldn't face what my life had become without a distraction, without him. When he opened the door, the moment he saw me, he knew. There was no need for words. There was no explanation necessary. He just pulled me into him. His arms holding me tightly as if I were the last thing he needed in this world. And for a moment I believed it. I believed that we could escape the chaos, the mess of my life. I believed that somehow, this would be the answer to all of my problems. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was still married. I was still broken. And no matter how much I wanted to believe that he could fix me, I knew the truth. There was no fixing this. There was no going back to who I was before the betrayal. No matter what came next, nothing would ever be the same again. The days after I left my husband were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything other than the chaos in my mind. I had tried to convince myself that what had happened was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. But I couldn't deny what I felt, what I had started to feel for the other man. The one who seemed to understand me in ways my husband never did. The one who listened when I needed to talk. Who made me laugh when I thought I had forgotten how. There was something intoxicating about him, something magnetic that I couldn't resist. Every time I saw him, I felt as though I was slowly coming back to life, like I was shedding the weight of my past and embracing a new, reckless version of myself. But with that came guilt, an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could I leave my husband for someone else? Someone who wasn't part of the plan? Was I really that selfish? Was I just running away from the pain instead of facing it? I had no answers. All I knew was that every time I thought of going back to my husband, the anger inside me flared up. I thought about all the lies, all the nights I spent waiting for him to come home, the moments I overlooked because I was too in love to see the truth. I was angry. And no matter how much I told myself I had forgiven him, the truth was, I hadn't. I wasn't sure I could. So, I kept seeing the other man. Every secret rendezvous, every stolen kiss, every touch, it felt like I was escaping the life I had built. I wasn't sure if I was falling for him, but I couldn't deny the way he made me feel. He made me feel like I mattered. I didn't want to admit it, but I was addicted to that feeling. I was addicted to the attention, to the passion. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt truly wanted. But even in the depths of my escape, I knew that this couldn't last forever. My marriage was still there. A looming shadow over everything. I had to face it sooner or later. I had to make a decision. It came in the form of a phone call. My husband, of all people, was calling me even after everything that had happened. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, my pulse racing. What did he want now? Had he finally decided to apologize? Or was he just trying to tie up loose ends? "Hey," he said, his voice calm, but there was a hint of uncertainty in it. "Hey," I responded. my words more clipped than I intended. There was a pause. I could feel the distance between us, the years of unresolved hurt hanging in the air. I had always thought that when this moment came, I would be ready. I would have all the answers. But standing there in my quiet apartment, facing the truth, I realized I wasn't ready at all. I miss you, he said, his voice breaking. I've been thinking about everything, about us. I want to make this work. I'll do anything to make it right. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to give in, to fall back into the comfort of the life I knew before everything fell apart. But there was another part of me, one that had been awakened by the other man, that was screaming at me to move on, to not fall back into the same pattern of forgiveness and forgetfulness that had kept me in a prison of lies for so long. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly, my voice shaking. "I want you back. I love you, and I know I've messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix it," he replied, his voice full of emotion. I felt a lump form in my throat. I had never expected this. I had expected anger. I had expected him to be defensive. But this was something else. It was raw, desperate. It was the side of him I had never seen before. And for a moment, I almost believed him. I almost thought that maybe we could start over, that maybe the love we had was still there, buried under the lies and mistakes. But then I thought of him, the other man, and the truth hit me harder than anything my husband had said. I wasn't just torn between two men, I was torn between two versions of myself. The woman I had been, the wife who had accepted all the lies and moved forward without question, and the woman I was becoming, the one who was ready to fight for her own happiness, no matter the cost. I hung up the phone without saying another word. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back. A few days passed, and the emotional roller coaster continued. I didn't know how to process everything. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing by walking away. I kept questioning myself, wondering if I had made a rash decision. Was I just running away from the pain? Or was this my chance to finally take control of my life? I kept seeing the other man. We had our moments of passion, but we also had moments of deep conversation, of connection. He wasn't perfect. I knew that. But when I was with him, I felt like I was finally being seen. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I didn't have to play the part of the dutiful wife anymore. One night, as we lay together, the weight of everything I had been through hit me all at once. My mind raced with the decisions I had to make. I could feel the pull of my past, of everything I had left behind. But I could also feel the pull of my future, the one I could create for myself. The future where I didn't have to apologize for wanting more, for wanting to be happy. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. He turned to me, his fingers tracing my skin. "I think the mistake would be pretending like this isn't real, pretending like you don't deserve to feel this way." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. Maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't a mistake to want happiness, to want something more than what I had before. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I filed for divorce. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its complications. There were moments when I doubted myself, moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision. But in the end, I knew that I had to let go of the past to embrace the future. It wasn't easy to walk away from my marriage, to face the reality of starting over. But with every step forward, I felt lighter. I felt like I was finally stepping into my own. Free from the chains of deception and betrayal that had bound me for so long, I continued seeing the other man. And while I knew that our future was uncertain, I also knew that for the first time in a long time, I was living for myself. I wasn't living for anyone else's expectations. I wasn't trying to fix what was broken. I was starting fresh, ready to build the life I deserved. There were still moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I had made the right choice. But I had learned something important through all of this. Sometimes surviving infidelity isn't about staying in a broken relationship. It's about finding the strength to move forward, even when you're afraid. It's about reclaiming your power and learning to love yourself again. And that's exactly what I was doing.